this crazy schedule we have. If you have any questions for today's session, please use the chat feature. It should be on the side. You can pop it out, and the ambassadors will be checking that chat and letting us know if you have any questions throughout the chat, and we'll make sure that we'll answer all those questions here at the end. Make sure that you've muted your microphones or your phones if you're calling in when you're not actively talking. Also, we're going to be recording today's session for those who can't join us live, and we'll hold the questions till the end, but please send your questions through as they come. And I know our panelists are more than eager to answer your questions and share their insights with you. So I'm fortunate enough here to have a group of amazing women here today to share their insights and experience. We have Tracy Ahrens, Kaitlyn Pennington, Amy Rumford, and Vinita Wallace. And I'm gonna let you guys introduce yourself, and we can start with you, Vinita, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up working in the supply chain field and what you want the people joining us today to know.
Sure. I'm originally from Chennai in India, and I did the NC State MBA program as an international student. Learned so much. I can almost say like it changed my life, especially in terms of my career. I graduated with a concentration in supply chain management and went to work for Hanes brands. Interviewed pregnant and still got several of the jobs that I interviewed for. So I think state really prepared me for a good career in supply chain management. And my job at Hanes was working closely with an advanced analytics team, but with the supply chain. So I was doing the business side of things there. And then I moved to VF Corporation, where I work now for almost 2 years. I work there as a senior manager of analytics and strategic initiatives, where I work on projects throughout the supply chain. Go Pack.
Thank you for sharing. How about Amy? Would you like to give the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Brittni, can you hear me okay? All right, fantastic. So I'm Amy Rumford. I am also a graduate of the Poole College, the Jenkins MBA program. And I'm a member of the board on the Poole College as well. So I've stayed close to the university since graduating there a number of years ago. I started out, I went to Penn State. I got a degree in industrial engineering, really related to Gina in the last presentation and her talk of loving math and science in high school. And I followed that same path into engineering, and I joined IBM in my first job out of college after co-oping with them. At the time, there was not a formal supply chain at IBM, but within the first several years there, I worked in I worked in finance, I worked as a cost engineer, and I also moved into the newly formed integrated supply chain organization. I became a manager leading a customer fulfillment organization, and I found I returned to customer fulfillment throughout my career. I was with IBM for 15 years. I actually left there in the midst of getting my MBA. I moved to Lenovo. It was not a choice of my own. Lenovo had bought IBM's personal computer division back in 2005, so that was my first career move. And I grew tremendously as a leader with a number of different director roles within the supply chain and the overall operations organization at Lenovo. I was the global chief of staff for the supply chain. I led indirect procurement. I also stood up a new global accounts customer fulfillment organization and got to work on an M&A when IBM's server business was purchased by Lenovo in 2015, which was something I always wanted to do. After that, I moved to Google. Google recruited me, and I moved into a newly created role called Director of Business Operations. I was working out of their corporate headquarters, supporting all of Google's data centers globally. So very technical role. I thought I had worked in technology throughout my career, but that was certainly the most technical role that I had, leading engineering teams, also a PMO and an analytics team. After working for Google for about 3 years, my mother got sick. She is back here in Raleigh, and I had to move her into assisted living. And I realized that I needed to be located and home-based back here at home in Raleigh. So I actually left Google at that time. I joined Advanced Auto Parts as Vice President of Supply Chain Service Planning and Analytics. And I've been with them for the past 2 years. I left Advance in December. It's not a bad run for working primarily in supply chain over the past almost 30 years, but very glad to be here today.
Thank you. We are very happy that you're here. And thank you, Tracy, for also joining us. If you would please introduce yourself.
Of course. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me, and I hope everyone is, as we've been saying around work, happy, healthy, and sane in these last couple of weeks of what's been going on. Excuse me. She said, my name is Tracy Ahrens. I am also a graduate of the Jenkins MBA program. I received my MBA as part of the professional part-time program, so I was working my current job and going to school part-time on nights and weekends. I am a biologist by training, undergrad and graduate degrees in cell biology, and have had quite a chameleon of a career. Originally started off, dead set I was going to be a marine biologist and study the great white shark. So you never know where you're going to end up in life. I currently work for Biogen in the Research Triangle Park area. Several of you probably are familiar with it. Going through my biological career, obviously did not end up being a marine biologist, but did find my way into the classroom environment for several years, was a high school biology teacher, and then found myself over in a lot of startup worlds here in the park. And then in a quality aspect, biological aspect, laboratory aspect, and then moved over into Biogen, where I have spent the remainder of my career in different phases of project management and what that looks like for Biogen. Did go back and get my MBA, found that I really had an aptitude and an interest for business, which I never would have thought that I had, but my time spent as project management, doing that before I even realized that's what I was doing, was able to actually articulate this is the skill set, and the MBA helped me develop that further. Currently within Biogen, I am responsible for operational systems improvement, business process optimization. We are a project management office that does portfolio management, Lean Six Sigma, large-scale portfolio management, individual project management, responsible for metrics, overall key performance indicators, strategic vision, a lot of chief of staff support for the manufacturing operations. And my connection back with NC State, obviously other than my degree, I am the Biogen representative and coordinator for our relationship with the NC State supply chain co-op, in which many students do their co-op their practicum projects. They do that, some of them at Biogen, and I'm responsible for that liaison and help with those projects. I'm also a member of the advisory board on the Keenan Fellows Institute for professional development for STEM education for teachers within the state of North Carolina. So thank you for letting me join you today.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. And Kaitlyn?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. So like she said, my name is Kaitlyn Pennington, and I'm also a Jenkins MBA alum. Seems to be a pattern. I am a supply market insights analyst on the supply management team at the American Red Cross. My role is on the procurement side of the house. So what I'm really focused on is working with our category management team and our business unit leaders to essentially provide them with a story of fact-based information that I build out from internal data from the Red Cross side, and also external data, market intelligence information. And the purpose of my role really is to be able to provide that information to category leaders and business unit leaders so that they can make better, more informed business decisions about the suppliers that we're working with. And so I get the chance to work with a variety of different folks across the organization, which is really exciting, and help to make sure that we are using our donor dollars in the best way and being the best stewards of the generosity of the American people at the Red Cross. So I'm very thankful for that. I also, much like Tracy, get to work with a lot of practicum teams from NC State. So we also work with the Supply Chain Resource Cooperative and partner with them to provide students an opportunity to learn, and also us an opportunity to get value from the students' valuable knowledge and their resources. So we're very thankful for that partnership, and I get to work a lot with NC State students through my role. So I'm very thankful for that. And I live in Garner, right outside of Raleigh, and I actually work remotely all the time anyways. So this is like a normal day for me. So no change today for me. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for each one of you for coming back and giving your experience back to everyone else. I have a lot of information that we can cover today, but it's really about your experiences and what we can give to others to help them grow. So one of the things that I think we always talk about is the field of supply chain management is always viewed as this male-dominated field. But last year, in 2019, Gartner showed that there was actually an increase of women in logistics and supply chain throughout the entire pipeline, which is new for the first time in the last couple of years. Starting in my time in the Marine Corps, I really learned that engaging allies was critical for me to develop myself professionally. What are some of the ways that you've benefited yourself or helped others benefit as allies or working with allies in advancing your career? Vinita, would you start us off with that, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. I think, to my point, like when I graduated and I was making a career shift, I used to work in investment banking before, and I kind of did my MBA because it was like this experiential learning, and I would get some experience in supply chain. So as I entered the workforce at Ahrens, there were a lot of women at the corporate office. And because it's an apparel company, even worldwide, if you look at the mix, there were a lot of women in supply chain because it's sewing, right? So manufacturing plants, you think about it. So there were a lot of women, and there were a lot of women in supply chain leadership as well. But I do very strongly feel that you need some strong allies as you work your way through the organization, just not just for day-to-day life, but as you navigate your career and think about your long-term plan. Our head of sourcing, our head of product development, our head of quality were all women at Ahrens, and just there was like no question. Like when I told them that I was pregnant, can I start now? They were like, yeah, come on over. Like, it wasn't even, they didn't make a big deal about it or anything. And when I went to build these relationships with them, I saw them as strong business leaders first. And then also just as other moms and, how they're navigating through their personal and professional lives. And it's really helpful to have those allies, not just with women, also with other men. And here at VF now as well, we have a lot of women in leadership who are women. And it's just great to see that. And I don't know if it's because it's apparel and footwear. Maybe some other industries are a little bit different. And I see that more and more people, as we recruit people, with all the, there's a lot of training that we have on, how do we get rid of our, unconscious biases and things like that. And it's some of it is gender based, but some of it can be as simple as, hey, are they skinny or tall or big or Asian or what have you? It can be any kind of biases that we might hold and we are not even aware of. That we get trained to kind of like see beyond that. Right now I don't see that. I'm not surprised by that Gartner statistic as we have more and more people. And Amy touched on this. When a few years ago, 20 years ago, supply chain was mostly logistics and distribution. And you think about it then, it's like people carrying a bunch of things into a truck and all that. But now it is you have strategic sourcing, as Kaitlyn was talking about, and women I think are very good negotiators, and we really play up on our strengths. And I'm not at all surprised by that statistic. And I would strongly encourage, students as they go into companies to seek these allies, and whether they come in the form of mentors or just even, relationships with other women and men, to ask them, hey, what do you do for the company? And, just learn about other areas, so that when you come to a point where you do need something, you already have that relationship to go off of.
I could add, thank you, Vinita. I think it sounds like you've had a great experience in a really diverse set of companies, and that's fantastic. My experience was a little bit different. The supply chains that I've worked in have been primarily men throughout, at different companies in different industries. And it really, from my perspective, it was not any different from what I experienced in college as an engineering student. Again, less than 20% women typically, and unfortunately I think it's still about the same. And then as I moved into my professional career, it was still mostly men. So I've grown up working with mostly men. I have noticed in the past probably five to 10 years, there is an influx of very competent, very bright young women who are entering the supply chain. And I think that's fantastic. And it's great to see them as they start to move forward in their career and move into leadership roles. Some of the things that I have done over time and am continuing to do, partner with the SCRC, work with student teams, give students, including female supply chain students, the opportunity to experience and work on real world problems in our companies. So I'm really happy to hear there are a number of us that are doing that. And I've also made an effort to be available as a mentor. Some companies have structured mentor programs, some it's more unstructured. If it's unstructured where you work, I'd say just let people know that you're interested in mentoring, that you're willing to mentor. I've mentored men, I've mentored women in their careers, and I always get something out of it as well. So it's really a win-win situation. And then the other thing I would mention is networking. Belonging to the SCRC and participating in the semi-annual meetings that they have give us an opportunity to meet with other professionals in the industry. And there are other professional networking and group opportunities as well, like Procurement Foundry or PMI or other organizations where you can meet either remotely, network online, take advantage of their resources, and or meet face-to-face in groups.
I definitely appreciate both those perspectives. I've had a relatively short career so far, so it's been interesting to see the ways that others in my own company have reached out to me to be an ally. We do have predominantly men within the supply chain at the Red Cross. There are, I think there's a growing base of really qualified, awesome women, which is great to see. But even from my last boss, Brian, I think I just have a good example of how I have been treated well and how someone has been an ally for me. I think being an ally really means caring about someone who maybe isn't exactly like you and helping listen to them and learn from them. And so my last boss, Brian, really cared about me and invested in knowing how I want to grow my career and who I am as a person. And he knew me well enough to know that the mission of the Red Cross is really what drove me. And when I was looking for a position after my MBA, I was really looking for something that would help me to utilize my skills, but also help me to feel that I had an impact from behind the computer, which is where I stay most of the time. And so he allowed me, after just a short time at the Red Cross, to be able to go out into the field and actually take 2 weeks off of my day job and work at a shelter during a hurricane disaster so that I could see the impact that my work was having on people's lives, because he knew how closely tied my desire with the mission, my desire to serve the mission was with my desire to work for the Red Cross. And so I'm just very thankful that he saw that desire in me and was able to take actionable steps to help me grow as a person and grow as a contributor to the supply management team. And I realize now, it definitely benefited supply management because he knew this at the time, I'm sure, but I came back with so many new ideas for ways that we could improve the way that we're doing things so that we could fulfill our mission better and better serve clients who are staying at shelters. And so I'm just thankful that for people in my career so far that have invested in getting to know me and therefore have the ability to help guide me to take steps that help me to grow as a person, but also as a contributor to our team.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. You all have very interesting. Tracy, I see that you want to give us your input, or would you like to?
No, go ahead. We can move on to the next. I'll start off the next question.
So as someone who's entering this field, my questions usually start with, what's your advice you would give someone interesting? But with the experiences you all have in the room, I'm more curious to learn about were you told when you entered this field, or what had you heard other people given that you might caution others to avoid in the future?
That's an interesting take on it. Advice that you would caution people to avoid. Well, to kind of piggyback off of where we were going before with two themes of a potential gender imbalance within STEM, not just within the supply chain, but in a common field. And then also the idea of allies and mentors and the whole network. I think the advice that I wasn't given, so it's not necessarily something don't follow, but I wish I had received, was how powerful maintaining the communication and being true to yourself is. When you walk into a room or you walk into a work environment where you are predominantly in a minority, whether it is gender, whether it is your educational foundation, whether it is nationality or any other platform in which establishes you as a minority. It's even if you work remotely, always trying to interact with people who work on site, something that sets you apart. It's very, very easy to fall into the trap of conformity and not being true to yourself and to your skill set. And that was the most detrimental thing I think I ever did to my career, in that it always puts you on your back foot. It makes you feel not confident about what you do bring to the table and the skills that you have. And so working with mentors over the years who have taken the time to get to know me, as other panelists have mentioned, and really maintain that conversation and that dialogue of who I am, what's important to me, what's my values, what do I want to learn, where do I want my career to grow. That is how they were able to be an ally and help me throughout my professional and personal career. And that even though you are different in an environment, especially the most common example, if you are the only woman in a room full of men, be confident in what makes you a woman in that environment. You think differently biologically. Anything that sets you apart in a diverse situation, hold on to that part that makes you unique and be proud to introduce that to that environment, because that is what adds value, strengthens the perspective, and makes you more marketable professionally. Now, as we are working much more in diverse populations, careers are advancing because people have a variety of skill sets that they can build upon in their career. So really anchor yourself to that diversity and what is genuine, and people will recognize that.
Great. That is definitely great advice, especially for a lot of us who come into the Jenkins program as career changers, who come from completely different fields like teaching or collegiate athletics like myself, that are looking to figure out where do I fit into this world, to know that we fit in by adding our value to that. So thank you for sharing. Would any of the rest of you like to offer any advice that you may have heard that you don't feel is exactly appropriate for entering the supply chain field?
I just wanted to add on to what Tracy said. I don't know that I'll exactly answer your question.
That's okay.
Just following up on Tracy's thoughts on the value of diversity of thought, of background, of industry. There is information that you have that's valuable to you. There's skills that you have that are valuable to you and the people that you work with. And you need to let the people you work with know about that. They need to know what they can rely on you for. If you are, maybe you are in a role where you're a supply chain analyst, but you've got some great background in project management in other roles or at other companies, let your teammates know. And I don't think people necessarily think about that. They want to move into their new role and show expertise in their new role, but all the experiences and skills that you bring along with you not only help round you as a person, but they can help you in that new role and help you fill in some gaps, as opposed to thinking, well, that's not part of my job or that's not part of my role description. And the other just advice I would give is, you hear about, as a woman, you want a seat at the table. That is not just a literal statement or not just a figurative statement. It is a literal statement. When you walk into the room and they have a conference room and a table and all those chairs around the edge of the room, sit at the table. People are more likely to listen to you when you are at the table. They can see your face, you're right there in the midst of the conversation, and people need to hear what you have to say. Take your seat at the table.
Yeah. Yes, if I can piggyback off of that, I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you. It's that balance between being genuinely who you are and falling into stereotypes. So just as much as you consciously go sit at the table, don't feel that you are obligated to be the person who takes the minutes of the meeting, or you are the person who does all of the action items. That if that's appropriate, to yourself, you do that. But it can be equally as appropriate as the man sitting next to you, or someone else in a different role, and really be conscious of that. Be conscious of the mansplaining, as it is often called, or making sure that credit is given to ideas that are potentially repeated or restated a couple moments later if they are taken, restated from a potentially gender switching position. That's really, really critical, and no one really highlighted that to me before. When you walk into that first experience of having that happen, it takes several experiences of, because did that really just happen? Did I really just miss that? So that was advice that I really wish someone would have shared with me, the reality of that situation and how to deal with it. So thank you, Amy, for bringing that up.
Yeah. So one thing that I thought about of the advice that people give you, but then you can take it too far and then and can backfire on you is be professional. I think, 2 years we're like taught to mirror and do this and do that. This is how you make presentations and things like that. And I think somewhere along those lines, if we take it too far, you can become a very serious individual and sort of lose your personality in that. And it's a really hard thing to explain, but it's just, you're almost like taking somebody else to work, and then that person works. And because we work a lot and in the evening, and then over time you find out that, oh my goodness, now you're this person. And then you've kind of lost all the things you enjoy doing, and I'm, again, I'm probably not stating all of this in the right words, but what I'm saying is take some of your true self to work and be willing to be vulnerable. And it's, that be professional. We sometimes take that way too far, especially when you're starting out. I mean, be professional on all the right things in terms of respecting others, be on time, make sure that you're following through your promises and things like that. But at the same time, don't lose your personality in that. Talk to people just like you would talk to your friends and build those stronger relationships. Talk about, families and hobbies and things like that, and take that piece as well to work, so that 3 years down you don't need a hard reset, but just like a mild reset, and you enjoy your time there a whole lot more. One thing that I see a very big difference between Haynes and BF, while Haynes was a very family-centric organization, at BF it's a very, very casual culture, and people talk a lot about the music they like and being outdoors and getting outside, and it's just it's subtle, but it's so powerful that it's so relaxing to be at work and do more and contribute more. And you're just a stronger professional when you're your own self, and in not worrying that, hey, how do people view my vulnerability versus here I am, right? Here I am, and I'm going to do well while at the same time respecting other people.
Great, thank you for sharing. As we talk about, taking your seat at the table, as it was put in, the theme of today is radical collaboration, as well as diversity as an inclusion. And the radical collaboration is inspired from the desire to learn from, offer, and embrace these diverse perspectives that we all bring within problem solving, idea generation, and solution finding. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, Kaitlyn, is this is kind of a time where the demand pattern for nonprofit organizations is really unpredictable, and sometimes really revolves with flexing to find that solution. Can you tell us about a time when radical collaboration was critical in accomplishing the mission that you had faced in front of you?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing that comes to mind is, so the Red Cross over the last couple of years has been faced with some pretty hefty cost savings targets. And so in supply management, we are critical in helping to meet those targets by working with our suppliers to reduce costs and still see improved quality. And so with these new goals of ours, we recognized that we were going to have to do something differently in order to meet them. And so a great example, I think, of kind of something radical, at least to us, that we had never experimented with before. We actually brought in our top 25 suppliers for our blood side. So we call it the biomed side. So our top 25 suppliers, we brought them in person, and we brought them to Washington, D.C. and had a meeting with them to be really transparent and share with them a lot of information, sensitive financial information with them. We shared our goals with them. And then we followed up on that by having what we called innovation workshops with each of these suppliers. And so we followed up and had smaller discussions with people from those organizations to understand how they might help us to meet our goals and to meet our targets. And so a lot of them just specialize in very different things from us. They're organizations that have very different core competencies than we do. And they're diverse organizations. Some of them are certified diverse suppliers, which is great. But we were able to say, hey, what are we doing that might make us a bad customer to you? What could we improve on that will help us to reduce costs together? What are some process changes maybe that we could make together that improve the supply chain and reduce costs for us, and maybe make us a better customer for you and you able to serve us easier? And so we came up with a lot of great ideas from that, and a lot of the suppliers were so thankful that we asked them, and we're so happy that we were kind of innovating together and not just knocking on their door asking for a price decrease because of our targets. So I think that's something that, at least for the Red Cross, that was radical to us. We had never done anything like that before, and some really great ideas came out of that we're working to implement now with the help of our suppliers. So yeah, that was a really exciting and creative thing that I think is a good example of that collaboration.
It absolutely is. And I think that's one thing that we benefit about in this field is it's so dynamic. And it seems like there's always a way to do something in a unique way. And one of the questions I had is, as you all are influential leaders in the industry, especially here in Raleigh, coming out of the area, and what steps can our leaders do to continue to attract and develop that diverse talent to ensure that this radical collaboration happens in multifaceted situations?
Well, if I may, I'd like to speak to that. I think we are all living right now in a very real opportunity to push some radical diversification, some radical innovation with what's going on, obviously with the coronavirus and a lot of environments having to work remotely, this conference being included. 5 years ago, I don't think a conference like this really could have been pulled off, let alone in the incredibly short timeline in which your team was able to do this, and the wonderful attendance that you have going on with this. So it's, the necessity is the mother of innovation. I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to really put on that mindset of being radical. You got to take that playbook and throw it out the door, because we just can't do some of these things anymore. But that doesn't mean that life doesn't go on. That doesn't mean there aren't ways to do it. It's the old adage, when Ford developed the car, you talk to a farmer and what he said was, he needed more horses to be able to plow more fields. So you didn't give him more horses, you invented a tractor, you invented a car. And I think I totally just butchered that analogy. But the idea that we don't know what it is that we need until we're forced to create it. And so embrace these opportunities, learn the skill set to be able to recognize them when they are presented to yourself, but to take that challenge and really use it as a motivative energy to really spark that creativity and learn to reach out. It's never going to come just from yourself, but it's through those collaborations, it's through that network, it's through that diversity, looking for information, that this spark of creativity and innovation really will come to life.
One thing that I can think of is in hiring and promoting, right? So just being objective, having very clear and transparent criteria for hiring and for promoting. Because when you have very loose criteria, then that's where sometimes it can be, you can have your biases creep in. Whether it is just asking everyone the same questions and then having some form of follow-up, or if it is for promotion, here are clearly defined goals and objectives. Here's what people need to do. Or this, if they need to go from a manager to a director or from an analyst to a manager, here's the expectations. So just being very, very transparent about it, so that when there is a person put in place for that job, everybody knows why, versus doing it in a very secretive manner, which can happen, which is the alternate of this, right? So it's it's that way it becomes aspirational, as here's the things that I need to do, here's the things that I need to learn, and then when that gets matched with a business need, and here I will be, versus nobody knows how it's going to happen, this person gets picked, or we're just going for 50% women in workforce, so now we're just hiring people and then the men are sour, what have you, right? So just making those objective criteria very transparent in hiring and promoting, I think would be helpful.
I would just add to that, as a hiring manager, I've often had conversations with my recruiters as I look at the slate of candidates they provide me, just very direct conversations to say, how come there are no women here? And maybe it's just a reminder for them, or sometimes they do have a reason for that, but often they'll go back and they'll rescan through some of the resumes that they've received, because they do that initial screening on our behalf, and sometimes they're screening out people maybe that I wouldn't necessarily screen out. If they're looking for, a certain hiring salary range, not everybody wants to discuss salary in that initial call with a recruiter. And what I found with one of the recruiters I was working with is if they wouldn't give him a number so that he could see if it was in the range or out of the range, he screened them out, whereas I would have screened them in and gone through the opportunity to have that conversation, or at least review the resume before deciding whether or not to take next steps. So I think that whole hiring process that Vinita just was talking about, even back to the very beginning of how we look at candidates, or how we get those resumes to review as we're trying to hire people, really needs to be looked at very discreetly. And there are things that we can do and questions we can ask as hiring managers to make sure we're getting the diverse set of candidates to make those choices from.
Thank you for the amazing points. As we wrap it up here with the questions that I have, that leaves us in a great thing where we're talking about hiring. And how do you see the current changes we're having, where more workers may find, like Kaitlyn, they enjoy working remote? I'm assuming that we do that and we enjoy that, versus the change from the traditional office, how that's going to affect the industry as a whole moving forward after this is all blown over. So any final thoughts you have on how you see the long term of traditional workforce in supply chain moving forward?
I think just in general, I have something that I've learned working remotely is that it really takes very intentional communication. So there is no dropping by somebody's desk to see how their weekend went on Monday morning. You've really got to reach out and make sure that you're building those relationships with people within your own office or workplace, by calling to check on somebody, or at the start of the call, maybe you don't jump right into the reason why you're calling, or the burning question you have. Maybe you do have a little bit of small talk intentionally, so that you can make sure that you're building those relationships. The same goes with amongst companies. I think hopefully this teaches us to become more intentional in our communication, and we can have pointed discussions with one another that are very meaningful, but also help us to build relationships remotely. I hope that that's a benefit. I've definitely learned a lot about that, because I think I felt very isolated for the first couple of months that I worked remotely, and it's because I didn't have that human interaction with my coworkers. But once I realized that there were intentional things that I could do to connect myself with my coworkers, or in this instance with people from other companies that you might be working with, I think that really made a huge difference to my work environment and my attitude. So I hope that's something we can all take away from it.
I would add one other thing. I think there's a lot of technology available today, and it was available 3 months ago, and it was available a year ago, but we haven't necessarily been using it. And this has forced us to actually utilize the technology that many, not all companies have. So I do think there will be changes moving forward in the way we work. Some supply chain jobs are very hands-on. If you're in manufacturing or in distribution, logistics, you need to be there to move product. If you're a supply chain planner or an analyst, you can probably, it's easier, I would say, to perform your role when your peers are around you. It's easier to ask questions. But the point Kaitlyn made about intentional communication, once you recognize that and actually actively practice it, I think there are quite a few roles that could be done remotely, or at least remotely on a part-time basis in the office part-time.
A quick little tip I will share with a colleague of mine who manages our global network for Biogen. So she literally shows up every morning. She goes into the office. She shows up at 8 a.m. She sits down at her desk. She puts on her headphones. She gets up at lunch to go for an hour to go downstairs to eat, comes back, puts on her headphones till she leaves at the end of the day. So technically that job could be done anywhere. But she said, even though she's physically in the office, she does feel very, very isolated because of those interactions. So a connection tip that she has really encouraged her colleagues to do is simply what we're doing is turn on the video and have that face-to-face connection. She said it felt awkward at first. Even joked about, okay, well, I guess I have to do my hair and makeup before I go into work today because someone's really going to be looking at me. But just having that video connection has made all of the difference. And so I've been trying to follow some of those same disciplines myself. And I think it's to your point, Amy, it's a simple technology capability that we already have, but it does help.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that. And right now we're going to move into the question and answers. And there's a couple here in the chat already. And so feel free to answer if you have a response to this question. What is one of your favorite skills that you've learned in the supply chain roles that you've had?
I can go on that one first if you'd like. So one of the key things is problem solving, and specifically it's just like structured problem solving. I mean, you first brainstorm and things like that, but just like, hey, what is the problem? What are all the different options? Even before we go into solving, it's just like, how can we reframe the problem? Are we solving the right problem? And then looking at all the different options and looking at possible outcomes of each of those options. So this was a class that I took with, this is two classes, one that I took with Professor Stonebreaker on decision analysis, and then another one with Dr. Kowalenko. I don't know if he's still with the university or not. Was, you know, so it's both of these are just decision making, but having, instead of just saying, hey, here was the problem and here's the answer and we're going to execute, it's showing that, hey, I've looked at all the options and this is the best solution because, and then taking the facts to the table. You'll have more people behind you following through and wanting to join you in execution versus just saying that here's one idea that I had and let's do it. So I think that's the whole structured problem solving that I learned. I think I've kind of implemented that throughout my career. I took different forms. And, you know, similar to Amy, she talked about this chief of staff role, which, you know, was very similar to the role that I had at Haynes. And now my current role is similar, but not quite chief of staff. But it's just helpful when you have several different kinds of issues that come up. You can always rely on that structured problem solving approach, and then explaining to people why we're making these decisions and explaining to people why this is the best choice of all the choices that are available.
I think for me, I talked about this a little bit at the start in my intro, but so a lot of my job is using the data available to us to provide meaningful information for someone and kind of translate that data into something that's meaningful for someone else. And so throughout my career so far, with essentially just through experience, I've really learned how to tell a good story with the data that's available. And I think that's a really good skill because at first, when a lot of times when you look at it at a data set or you look at the information that's coming in from your supply chain or from your procurement practices, it doesn't resonate with a lot of people, especially folks in the business right away. Sometimes it just doesn't resonate well. And so one thing that I've learned is just how to use that data, the raw stuff that comes to you, that might be meaningful to you alone, to create the story that helps to influence someone to make a different decision or make a better decision based on that information that you're providing to them. And NC State started that process for me by helping me to understand how data can be meaningful to someone and how to tell that story. So I'm thankful for that.
Great, thank you for that. And I think that's definitely one thing that we have is a lot of analytics on our side, and that's something that Jenkins does very well. And I've had the chance to been learning this year, so I'm very thankful to have you guys with us. Angela in the chat actually asked, is it easy for someone working in sales for many years to make a change into supply chain? And I'm hoping, Tracy, maybe you can answer this question a little bit as someone who did change careers in a sort of what it was like for you to change and what kind of ways she could make a step forward.
I think transitioning out of sales gives someone an amazing advantage transferring into any other chosen area of focus, because so many skills to be successful in sales of understanding the customer's perspective, being able to think globally yet still deliver on the details that are needed, understanding the data and the finances behind it, are applicable in any business field, whether it's supply chain or any of the other concentrations offered by Jenkins or in any MBA program. So I would definitely encourage it. I think it would be a very harmonious skill set to be able to build upon, and so many things that make people successful. Even looking back on my own perspective, even though I have advanced degrees in biology and I do still work for a biological company, so it does be able to help to be able to understand the purpose and mission of the product and the methodologies that we use. The skills that I use every day are a lot of what have been talked about already: problem solving, communication, project management, relationship management, being able to transition between large scale strategic thinking to daily detailed deliverables. And that, if you build that foundation of skills in any previous experience, whether it's an academic base, an athletic base, a professional base, they do transfer from any career path that you would like to go on.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to the four of you for being here. It really makes me proud to be part of the Jenkins program, to see the amazing things you all have gone on to do. And I hope to be able to continue to learn from you and have you back next year to continue to keep telling more stories and encouraging more women to grow within this field. I want to thank everyone out there that came to view us. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead and take a quick break, and you can check the conference schedule for the next Zoom session. Grace has put the link here in the chat session that should help you be able to get there. If you want to exit this meeting, go ahead and leave meeting. And thank you again to the four of you for coming and helping me get my first experience with this virtual moderating a panel. I've greatly appreciated talking to you, and I hope you stay happy, healthy, and safe.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much.